Today we'll be studying one of the greatest classical painters of 19th century France, William Adolphe Bouguereau, and his masterpiece Girl with Pomegranate. Bouguereau was one of the leading figures of the academic painting tradition. His works are renowned for their exceptional realism, refined brushwork, and gentle luminous light. In this lesson, we'll use this painting as our reference and go through the entire process, from transferring the drawing, blocking in the composition, establishing light and shadow, and applying white highlights, to painting the skin tones. I hope this demonstration will help you gain a deeper understanding of Bouguereau's classical multi-layer painting technique. Before we start painting, let's prepare the materials. I'm using an oil canvas-sized 45-60 centimeters with a semi-absorbent ground. This dries faster than a fully oily ground and makes it easier to control value. Transitions perfect for multi-layer techniques. First, we transfer the drawing from paper to canvas. I lightly brush a thin layer of brown paint on the back of the sketch paper and blend it, evenly creating a kind of homemade transfer paper. Then I place the drawing over the canvas and trace the lines using a ballpoint pen or hard pencil with firm pressure, allowing the pigment to transfer. This method is cleaner than using carbon paper and won't stain the ground layer, while still allowing later adjustments. Once finished, we'll see clear outlines of the composition on the canvas. I usually spend quite some time perfecting the proportions during sketching. Now we move to the value underpainting, focusing on shadows and highlights. The medium here is a mix of turpentine and linseed oil at about a 4:1 ratio, mainly to thin the paint. For the darks, I use vermilion mixed with ivory black to create a warm brown. The goal is not detail, but to establish a solid value structure. Since the light comes from the upper left, the right side of the face falls in shadow. You can deepen the darks gradually, while keeping the light areas mostly the raw canvas. The brushwork here should feel more like wiping than painting. In this stage, oil painting resembles a wipeout technique, using transparent layers to suggest volume. Once the light and shadow are established, the form will begin to emerge, and the warm brown undertone provides a beautiful base for the following color layers. After the shadows, we move on to adding white to the light areas. I'm using flake white for its fast drying and moderate covering power. If unavailable, zinc titanium white can be substituted. This step is critical. It's like adding the polished surface to a sculpture. We strengthen the light areas forehead, nose bridge, cheeks and fingertips, using thin, soft strokes. Keep the white layer thin and moist. Blend edges gently with a clean brush to create smooth gradations. Once done, the whole painting should show a strong sense of light and form, even before adding color. At this stage, you can also check the accuracy of your drawing. If the facial structure looks off, it's best to correct it now. Bouguereau emphasized structure in his work. Each light and shadow followed anatomical and optical principles. So take your time. Compare often with reference prints if you can, or even print sections of the painting for close study. Because my canvas has a smooth surface, paint adhesion can be weak. So I did the underpainting twice, waiting for the first layer to fully dry before applying the second. In the second layer, I used earth green mixed with vermilion for the darks, and flake white again for the lights. After finishing the face, I used leftover paint to glaze a light color wash on the clothing as well. Next, we'll start painting the skin tones. Before I begin, I've pre-mixed the skin colors using flake white, yellow ochre, vermilion, and cobalt blue. This is a common technique I learned in art school. Before painting a portrait, it's helpful to prepare the main color mixtures in advance. This way, the painting process becomes much smoother, and you don't have to stop frequently to remix colors, which can interrupt your rhythm. It's especially useful when painting from life. Some students have asked me how to make their paintings look more harmonious in color. Often, their works are based on photo references, which can result in a photo-like look. My suggestion is to find a classical painting with a similar composition and lighting and use it as a color reference. Try replacing the colors from the photo with those from the master painting. You'll begin to notice the difference between photographic color and painterly color. In this first layer of skin tone, you can see that I'm not painting too deeply yet. I'm just laying down the general tones for each area and leaving the finer details for later stages. The second passive skin tone is similar to the first, but richer and more developed. For example, I add more details and transitions between light and shadow. When painting a figure, some areas should be more vivid, such as the cheeks, ears, and finger joints. These parts require a touch more red compared to the rest of the skin, which gives the figure a more lively appearance. A common issue for beginners is not knowing how far to take each stage, or being unsure whether their current layer is good enough. As a result, they tend to rush ahead, eager to see the final effect. Unfortunately, there's no shortcut to solving this. For beginners, it's very helpful to have a teacher who can guide you, someone experienced enough to evaluate whether your current stage is correct. Through repeated practice, you'll gradually develop an understanding of each phase of painting, and learn to work more calmly and confidently, rather than hurrying to the finish line. Next, let's move on to painting the clothing and the headscarf. When painting this part, you still need to follow the principle of working from the general to the specific. No matter how complex something appears, as long as you use this approach, it becomes much easier to handle. Of course, to truly master this, you need to develop your ability to generalize. What does that mean? It means that at the end of each stage, your painting should already look complete in a simplified sense. Take the headscarf as an example. I first applied a base layer of warm brownish yellow with basic light and shadow. Then on top of that, I gradually added more folds, interwoven shapes, and transitions, refining the highlights, shadows, and reflected light. Always remember, paint the large folds first, and leave the smaller details for last. A common mistake many students make when painting details is losing control over the relationship between the whole and the parts. Specifically, they tend to overemphasize local details. For example, a fold in the shadow area also has its own light and dark sides. However, the light side within that shadowed fold should still be much darker than the highlights in the illuminated area. In practice, even many students with painting experience, and sometimes even art school teachers, fail to make this distinction correctly. Once the folds are finished, we can move on to the finer details. Using the same method of generalization, pay attention to how the color of these stripes changes across different light and shadow areas. The same purple tone appears differently in shadow and in light. It's not just a matter of darker or lighter, but also a shift in color temperature and hue. Keep one thing in mind. When you try to learn painting through fixed formulas, you're falling into the trap of letting your brain take shortcuts. The correct way is to develop a method of observing and summarizing. Painting is not about avoiding thought, but about thinking more deeply. The biggest reason for stagnation is the lack of generalization in form, color, and value. Once you truly understand how to generalize in these three dimensions, your level will surpass most others. Next, let's talk about a very important principle, fat over lean. This means that as you progress through the layers of a painting, each subsequent layer should contain more oil than the one beneath it. The lower layers should have less oil, paint thinned mostly with turpentine, which allows them to dry faster. The upper layers should gradually include more linseed oil or painting medium, giving the colors a richer, more luminous quality. If you do the opposite, if the lower layer contains more oil than the upper one, the surface may crack as the painting dries. In multi-layer painting, this rule is absolutely crucial, because this technique usually takes a long time to complete. Any mistakes in handling mediums can lead to serious problems, or even ruin the painting entirely. From my own experience, I've encountered three main issues related to this. 1. Too much thinner in the top layer. When the upper paint layer contains too much solvent, the paint film becomes unstable. Later, when applying varnish, the solvent can dissolve parts of that weak film, forcing you to repaint it. The role of a painting medium is to help form a solid, cohesive film on the surface. Solvents, on the other hand, weaken that structure. From my personal experience, odorless mineral spirits are even more destructive than turpentine, likely because turpentine evaporates more quickly, so it damages the paint less. 2. Too much oil in the upper layer. When the paint contains too much oil, it can cause severe yellowing over the years. In many painting discussions, people often mention all sorts of miracle mediums that supposedly improve your painting's effect, but these methods are risky. You might not notice any problem at first, but many issues only become visible years later. That's why I recommend all oil painting students to use simple, reliable mediums and to use them sparingly. 3. Lean paint applied over a fatty layer. If you apply a lean low-oil paint layer on top of an oily one, the result is cracking within about a year. This problem is especially common when applying color over white paint, particularly dark absorbent colors like black or brown. At this point, we've completed the main stages of Girl with Pomegranate. From transferring the sketch, building the light and shadow structure, and applying the white highlights, to developing the skin tones and finer details. I hope this demonstration helps you gain a deeper understanding of the essence of the classical multi-layer painting technique. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.